right, are we on this? Yeah, let's actually stop that and get on here. Oh, we're on there. Sorry, you guys. All right, week 12. I know, we time travel all the time, so in your notes, week 12 classwork. This is kind of my, spring break joke. Spring break expectations, spring break reality. I think I told you all that I had a plan to, during spring break, do some heavy digging, but I hurt myself, so I ended up doing some heavy studying, which was totally fun, but not the same, but totally fun. So today, in your notes, we're going to do a few class topics, and then we'll move on to the two major topics that we have today. The first one, believe it or not, there's only 5 lectures left. Wow, okay? So I also want to do this. I want to show you what I did yesterday in Canvas. We'll talk about this in a minute, but I loaded up all the remaining weeks that you have, right? So week 11, obviously we're in week 11 talking about week 12, but our JavaScript, our chapter quizzes, and then we start into Access. Really, really important topic. And then week 13, we have JavaScript again, classwork of course, week 14. But check this out, after week 15, it starts to slow down. I actually plan this course so that the last couple weeks of the semester it starts to slow down, and I do it on purpose because I start out the gate. Did you notice, like week 1, I had stuff for you to do. And I do that purposely with the anticipation that hopefully I can slow down at the end to give you a chance to end well. Because here's what happens is many of the instructors, they leave the big items to the end, right? You got those big reports, you got those big tests. So I try to be against the grain. So having said that, you can see everything's loaded here. The final is showing, but it's not available yet. And I might as well just go ahead and do that to it. Because here's the deal, our last chapter chapter quiz is in week 13, or week 14, it's chapter 13. So after we finish that quiz, then I will release the final for you to work on. Remember, it is 10% of your grade. It's 150 questions. And where do you take the final? Anybody remember I actually talked about? Yeah, my IT lab, right? And you'll post your score just like you do on your other my IT lab stuff. So the thing is, once I release it, you can be done with this class even before week 17 if your schedule allows, okay? And don't forget that what if ability in, because here's the question I will start getting: what do I need to get on the final to achieve a particular grade in your class? And I'm going to say Canvas will do that for you. Remember me showing you the what if? You can go in there and ask the what if. So keep that in mind. Okay, any questions about that stuff? So other good news is that some of you may get a little, the JavaScript stuff is interesting. I love it. That's what I studied over break. But for the last 2 hands-on, I'm going to give you alternatives. Okay? Here's the alternatives. For the while, and it's a while loop, and you're learning how to loop in JavaScript, you're going to see an alternative hands-on assignment. You can do the PowerPoint assessments for chapter 1 in that week, and then you can do the chapter 2 in the next. So if you're somebody that would like to maybe get a little more experience with PowerPoint in lieu of the JavaScript, right, you're welcome to do that. But if you're into the JavaScript, keep going, right? It's a good thing. It's all good. Okay? So the only thing, and I say this in there, unlike normally in the My IT lab, you put it into the shared with Rio. This one you'll have to make sure on your print screen you share it with everyone, because you'll be posting it into the discussion boards for the hands-on. So put that in your notes just so that you make sure you pay attention to that. So when do we start winding down in this class? Actually in week 15, because we go from 4 items a week in week 15 to 3. We lose the chapter quiz, and then in week 16, we lose the hands-on. We'll have the final lab test, and then in week 17, it'll be the week classwork and the chapter quiz. And I believe that this is 17 because it's actually it's the Monday of the week of finals, okay? And I think I told you, if you happen to check out right before we left for break, that I'm leaving the day after we do this. So you want to make sure if you need to talk to me, we do it before then, but I'll be accessible via email, even though I'm traveling at that point. Okay, any questions about this stuff? Okay, here's the other thing I have in my notes here is that I also have more good news for you. Is on the Excel lab test, I've gone through in Canvas and I've provided an example of what it should look like. And I've provided 4 print screens. The first print screen is of the first sheet. This is just the formatting. The more probably helpful thing to you is I've also provided what the formulas need to look like. Anybody happy about that? No? Yeah? I should see some, yeah, right on, Rio, thank you. Because I think sometimes, and here's what I would say to you, is it's good for you to be able to read, like, here's the kind of formula you need to create and be able to translate that into a formula. But sometimes it's a little hard to do that. And so I want to give you the opportunity to A, do well, and give your experience of knowing how to do this another shot. So I've given you also the set, so there's 2 sheets that you have to do. Here's the second sheet. Again, the formatting, the pie chart, and of course, more importantly, is the formulas themselves. So this should maybe make everyone's life, Nate, are you happy? Yes. Yeah, because Nate already has been talking about that it is a little hard for this. So here's the other thing is your employers are going to expect you to have good Excel experience, okay? The one concept you probably need to walk away with besides knowing how to take, here's what I want you to do and convert that into formula and put this in your notes is the difference between relative and absolute. Do you remember having my IT lab train you on that concept? The relative and absolute. The absolute is when you put the dollar signs, and that means the cell references don't change. This is, matter of fact, kind of in interviews, they'll ask you if you know the difference as a way to see how well you know Excel. So make sure you got that concept. But in general, here's what it means. Relative means I'm going to change my cell references as you copy formulas down. But absolute means I'm not going to change my cell reference. I'm going to leave that cell reference. Like if you have a cell that says 20%, you're going to multiply everything by that. The cell where that's referenced would have the dollar sign so it doesn't move. And you had that experience in my IT lab. Okay. All right, so I wanted to show you that. So hopefully that makes your lives a little bit easier when it comes to that's due. Again, hopefully the online students, some of them will see this beforehand. All right, so let's talk about, one other short topic on classwork, or class topics. Over break, I had previewed for you all that I was going to do the Rise of the Robots, right? PBS. Over break, somebody contacted me and said that PBS put up what's called a paywall. So they couldn't access it. And actually, we should almost call it not a paywall. You know what a paywall is, where you have to pay to get access to it? But it was a donation wall. Said, you can't watch this unless you donate. And I was like, you're PBS, come on. But at the same time, I'm like, I totally get it. PBS is, they have to raise money. They're not completely funded. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go check. So I went to YouTube and I searched for it. And guess what? It was there. So ethically, do you think there's an issue with me giving you a link on YouTube that the PBS who created it intended for you to pay for it? What do you think? No? William says no. Anybody else? Yeah? You don't see anything wrong with it? You see, I was conflicted, and here's what I'll be honest with you about. So is it a copyright violation for somebody? Now, by the way, I didn't post it. I'm just going to tell you, right? So let's just go to YouTube real quick, just because I think it's good for you to know about copyright. If I go to YouTube, and I could go into Canvas and just show you the link. Although lovely speed, thank you very much. Look at that speed. Isn't that lovely? We are waiting. Anyway, so rather than to show you, let me just tell you who posted it was somebody who doesn't have a lot of subscribers, and they're called Documentary. And so what they're trying to do is increase their subscribers by offering something that they know is hard to get. So it's a real ethical dilemma, and I went ahead and posted it, but I can tell you there is a chance YouTube is going to catch it and take it down. So you might want to watch it sooner rather than later. I'm just saying, okay? I will have to have an alternative if it comes up. So in your notes, just kind of note, do you think I should have done it or not? What do you think? What's your ethical opinion about that? Obviously I did it, so you know how I fell on it. Because it's PBS, it's public education. But at the same time, I totally understand it. Okay, so in your notes, we have two topics for today. One is a network redux, which is basically a relook. Because when we did, I had you all do, and if some of you may not have completed it yet because I've extended it, the home network map. I said at the time, if you understand, your home network will teach you a lot about the larger internets, right? The larger networks, internets. That's actually a joke, sorry. An inside joke for those of us on networks, because there was somebody that testified one time and they called it the internets, and we all laughed. And so now I do it. In my head, I'm laughing. You may not be, but. So the idea of a network, right? The largest network is the internet, right? Your home network is a LAN. A network on your body is a PAN, personal area networks, right? So all these terms, right? MAN is another one, which is a metropolitan. So if we had a network for all of Fresno, that'd be a MAN. So, but I think I want to make sure I've covered these topics. So here's a couple things I want to make sure we've talked about. One is that when your Wi-Fi router has a standard, and that standard will indicate both the frequency it runs on, and the wave frequency, and the max speed and the max distance that it covers. Right, so the newer routers do a better job of going faster and going farther as far as your distance that it covers. So it's good to know, and there's really nothing you can tell by looking at just your Wi-Fi on your computer. You'd have to go to your router to find out what that standard is, and it's pretty easy to find out. So if you're going to update your router, you have some great choices these days, but just keep this stuff in mind. So this is called the Wi-Fi standard. Have that in your notes. Okay, and the book covered that. The book talked about Wi-Fi standards. The other thing is that your cellular phone has a similar standard, although it's not named the same, but it indicates, again, the speed, right? From the old 1G up to 5G now, which we're not seeing a lot of 5G, although T-Mobile is going to roll some out soon. But here's the deal, is can you really use your cellular phone to be your main provider of internet? Or your cellular service, assuming you have data. Can you? It depends on what? Really depends on two things. The speed at which you have access and your plan. How many of you want unlimited plans? Anybody? AT&T? T-Mobile unlimited? Okay. Are you sure T-Mobile is unlimited? Yeah, see this whole unlimited thing is a real BS or a marketing term, because I have the same program, right? And I get high speed up to a certain amount, and then once I reach that amount, it goes down to a lower speed. So that's why cellular network for what most of your internet is probably not suitable because of that shift. Now AT&T, anybody on AT&T here have unlimited? Do you have unlimited? No? Yeah, it's expensive, and if you have grandfathered in, you know what that means? If you had an old plan, many people that have the old AT&T will not give it up. Holy mac, and it's because of that unlimited data, right? So just keep these things in mind. So the other thing is, the way we look at networks too is the way they interact, all the computers interact together. So your home network is called a peer-to-peer. So in your notes, put peer-to-peer. And you can actually abbreviate this called P2P. You may have heard that term in your travels throughout the universe, right? So peer-to-peer, this is your home network. It's peer-to-peer. That means no computer has control or can give any authorization to any other. We're all like peers. We're all the same level. That's opposed to the other network architecture that's called client-server. So like on this campus, we have a client-server environment. And what that means is before you can do anything on this campus, you have to run through a server and it has to okay that you can do it. Okay? So these are called network architectures. These are the two major kind. At home, everybody has which one? Peer-to-peer. 99.9% of all home networks are peer-to-peer. Most networks that are run on a business are probably this type. But there's another thing that's kind of interesting here about, so it's client server. So in order to have anything, the client has to ask the server, I need this, bring it to me. So this model has been around in many ways. We see it all over the web. When you ask for a web page, you're a client, you're asking for something from the server, it delivers it back to you. But interestingly enough, this was also what got Napster Anybody remember Napster? Yeah? What was Napster? They were music, file sharing. And what happened in Napster? Napster generation 1.0, because Napster came back and became Rhapsody and some other stuff. What happened to the first Napster? They got taken down. Now, what happened the day after Napster got taken down was they were this kind of architecture. They were a client server. And what that meant is there was one server sitting out there that had all this music. By the way, the reason file sharing became feasible was back in the day we took audio files and we compressed them down into the MP3 format that allowed it to be small enough to be transferred. And Napster came up with the idea of, hey, let's just put all the music here. Everybody can come get it. The lawsuit came down, and they said, we're going to take you guys offline. So how did they do it? Pretty easy, and this because of the way they were architected, because all they had to do was go over and take the plug off the server. But guess what happened the day after Napster went down? File sharing became peer-to-peer. And the difference there is, if you take one device offline in a peer-to-peer network, nobody cares, right? Because you just keep going because of the architecture. So make sure you have it in your notes just to understand the difference between client-server and peer-to-peer. So peer-to-peer means everybody has the same rights and permissions on the network. And client-server, you don't. You have to have authority. Okay, so I just want to make sure you have that. And kind of an interesting story about Napster. And by the way, what's the latest evolution of peer-to-peer? No. How about BitTorrent? Okay, BitTorrent is actually just the next evolution of peer-to-peer file sharing. And we can talk about whether it's good or not, right? We could talk about whether it's good for your system, but just, keep that in mind. It's generally, if you get a piece of music or a movie that hasn't been released or you'd have to go buy, it's probably illegal, okay? Just know that. So here's the other thing I want in your notes is network topologies. So in addition to the architecture and stuff like that, we do talk about how we configure these networks, right? How we broadcast the signals out so that they can, because remember, computer networks, right, communicate digitally. So we have to have a way we can connect with all of them. And what I mean is from this perspective, like here's your most common types, right? Your bus, but actually your most common type is right here. Your home networks are all star, meaning from that router, they're all connected either if they're wired directly or if they're in a network, it's still, or if they're in Wi-Fi, it's still on star, right? So this is the most popular, most common, because it's the most reliable. Because if you break one network connection, if you break one connection right here, let's say, right, everybody else stays up. But over here on the bus network, if you break the connection, somebody cuts the cable here, depending on where the signal's generated, you may lose one, you may lose all 6 PCs or desktops or whatever they are. So what's the most popular topology? Star, because it's the most reliable. Interesting story, true story. Here, FYI, when I was a systems engineer, one of my jobs back in the day, before the internet became what it is today, it was just fledgling, okay? They came to me and they said, Rio, we want a new network. We want you to do the research and find out how to do it. Well, at the time, who was servicing them was IBM. Have you heard of this little company called IBM? Yeah, sorry, big company, right? So IBM was their vendor of choice at the time. When they asked me to go research, what I found out was there was this emerging standard coming out, and it was called TCP/IP. But IBM was selling, at the time, Token Ring, which was not as reliable, and based on my research at the time, was not going to be the thing that propelled us into the next part. So I went back and recommended for this $500,000 network that we used the network protocols that were coming up on the internet. Guess what IBM did? Wrote a letter to my boss saying how stupid I was, how irresponsible I was being by choosing the standards I had chosen, right? How do you think that felt first? It felt horrible at the time, but about a year later, it felt really good. because we were right at the point where people were starting to realize, and luckily I had some good research skills, and boy was my boss happy when they realized we'd made a better choice for the company, right? So me against IBM is the visual here, and it was really kind of a, one of those, I was young, I was just coming out, and I was just trying to figure out how I wanted to do what I was doing, and it was totally fun though. Because I got to go, and I did, actually. The vendors would come in and I would go, Of course, the other thing is, and I'll be really honest with you, I got a really nice bonus that year. Really nice, okay? We went with both the topology of the star, and we went with the protocol I'm about to talk to you about, which is TCP/IP. And that's what runs the internet, and that's what runs your home networks, and that's what's everywhere now. At the time, it wasn't. It was token ring for businesses. Businesses were running IBM equipment, were running token ring, and we're getting ready to deploy, like I said, a $500,000 network. You guys heard of this company, Duncan Enterprises? Ceramics? Over on, yeah. Anyway, that's who I worked for. I was a systems engineer for them. So I was very proud of that time. So here's the other thing, is that the other thing that really this talks about is the protocols. So, we have a protocol as humans, right? You talk, I talk. Hopefully we don't talk over each other. But these protocols are really how we agree upon acting, right? Do you know if you meet the Queen, there's a particular way you have to act? You might know what it is. You have to bow, and there's a particular way you have to bow, and you can't look her in the eyes, right? That's a protocol that as humans has been developed over years. Well, computers have a protocol too, and TCP/IP is the idea of breaking this communication pattern up into packets and sending it across a network. As a matter of fact, here's what, from a low level, what happens is you have a host. It wants to send a communication from host 1 to host 2. It breaks the communication into these packets. These packets travel out throughout the network and then come to the host. So if you were to understand every time you were doing something on the internet or even in your home network, that this is what's happening thousands of millions of times per second, and it's actually working. So like right here, if this, let's say the green one didn't come in, and these two would be waiting. And if what would happen is they'd say, send me another one, I don't have that one, because the header knows, and its header is the way the packet is configured. So this packet switching is huge. It's the way this is the way everything runs these days. It's called, put it in your notes, packet switching, okay? Data packets. We break them into these data, we break it into these packets, we send the packets out throughout the internet or the home network or whatever it is, and it's the way modern networks work, okay? And really, it's kind of like if you really understood how the bumblebee flies, you'd be freaked out, because the bumblebee's body's so big. But this is the same way with this. If you really got and saw this working, it kind of blows your mind that we actually get anything to work on the internet or even on our home networks, but it is efficient for some crazy, amazing reason. So this is called a protocol. So the most common protocol is TCP/IP. So the TCP part is the packet, breaking it into packets. The IP part, we had an experience about for where you found your IP addresses. Remember that? Remember those IP addresses? And I said also IP addresses are changing because they're becoming IP6, right? So they'll look differently. But this protocol is the way that we do it. And we're going to talk next week, maybe the week after, about how it works protocol-wise when you ask for websites. Really, really important, okay? So that's really what I wanted to do with the network start. So the other topic I want to talk to you about for a few minutes, I already did packet switching. Let me end with this, and then we'll switch topics. So if you were somebody that was studying networking, what you would really have to study is this, and it's what it's called is the OSI model. So it is the model by which all networks, any new networking coming up, these are standards and how it does from a physical layer all the way up to the application layer. So if you were somebody studying networking, you'd study the heck out of this. So this is the standard that we have for doing any kind of networking communications at all. Okay, so here's my next topic, JavaScript. So in your notes, the next major topic, make sure you give it a different heading when you do it, is JavaScript, right? So some of you have already started into the JavaScript stuff, right, in Codecademy. I know a couple of you have, right? William did. I know. I saw his comment. It was good. And the reason I'm saying this is I'm actually going to talk about some things you may run into with JavaScript. But first, JavaScript is really, really, really good to learn. And I'll show you why. First, when we look at, this is an article about the most in-demand programming language of 2016. And JavaScript is number 3. Now, SQL is probably something most of you have never heard of, okay? But we're going to start into Access soon, which is databases, and SQL is the language we use to query, to write queries of databases, questions. This is so hugely powerful, okay? Now, and many folks think Java and JavaScript are related, and they're not. Okay, so if you ever heard that Java, which is another programming language, and JavaScript are related, totally not. Now, it wouldn't have made sense if that was true. They would have used different names. The history of JavaScript, which I'm not going to do today because it is crazy how it came to be, but JavaScript is the programming language of the browser. So in your notes, JavaScript is the programming language of the browser. So the other image I just want to show here in my, oh, that's gonna suck. Oh, that's gonna suck. Anybody see what happened? What's the spinning thing? Yeah, check that out. Let's see if, no, it's dead. It's dead, Fred. What causes that? What causes the spinner? Huh? Could be, but I have a pretty high-powered Mac. What would cause, we're gonna have to reboot, so I'm just gonna hang out, let's talk for a minute. So, what causes the spinner? It depends on the operating system, true, right? It could be network, but in my case, I'm having it more often. Could be too many things running. Probably something in error. Something is causing a, huh? Yeah, good question. Do we see viruses on the Mac? Not as much as we see them on the PC. Oh, and look, I even got a message. You won't see it. You won't see it there. I'll have to bring that back, okay? But interesting, right? So interesting to see, because I've been having this lately, and actually before I was here today, I did a little research about it. Because I wanted to know myself what it was causing, so I'm going to have to probably end up reformatting my system from scratch, which is really not as bad as you might think. It is just a good thing to do once in a while. So what were we talking about? We were talking about JavaScript. So in your notes, JavaScript is the what? Is the most popular, let me go ahead and reconnect this, is one of the most popular what? Programming languages, very nice. Are we back? Do you have the screen back? Okay, hold on. Yeah, I'll cut this out. Ah, sweet. Okay, JavaScript's one of the most popular programming languages out there. And part of the reason is it's so simple and the barrier to get in is really low. So let me just bring up my thing here because I really want to show you one more image. That is so frustrating. How many of you have had that happen when you're doing something and your computer freezes and you have to power it off like I did, which is holding the power down? It's crazy, right? So JavaScript. So here's the thing. JavaScript is one aspect of what's what we call, and put this in your notes, HTML5, right? So HTML5, which is the not emerging, but is the standard what we have for developing web apps these days. So just to contextualize this, if you were a developer and you want to develop, I'm looking for my phone. Is it around here? Oh, it's hidden. If you were a developer and you want to develop for the phone, there's two major phones out there, right? What are the two major kinds of phones? Apple, which is iOS. Interesting, we could talk about the whole Apple, the iPhone thing, right? That would be, maybe we'll talk about what happened with that. You guys know what happened with the trying to get into the Apple phone and how the FBI and the government, oh, that's, and by the way, what's the final resolution with that? They ended it because a third party came in and did what Apple wouldn't do. They cracked the phone, they got into it, and they gave them the information that the feds wanted, but Apple wouldn't. Huh? Yeah, well, FBI FBI, well, see, I wasn't going to talk about this, but let's talk about it. FBI that wanted Apple to crack into the phone to give them the information about the San Bernardino terrorist, right? And Apple said no. Why did Apple say no? Yeah, so if you crack into it, right? Are you as an iPhone user is your private information possibly gonna be at risk? It already is, but yeah, more so possibly. So Apple said no, we're not gonna do it. Well, a third party stepped up and said we can do it for you, FBI. And by the way, huh? Yeah. No, it was a company. I'm pretty sure. They're actually not talking about who it is. It's probably part of the disclosure they can't. Okay, but they got into it. And they said, okay, Apple, we're good. We don't need you guys anymore. Which, by the way, makes Apple look really bad in a way. But at the same time, they're trying to protect your privacy. So it's a hard thing to talk about. Anyway, back to here. So iPhones, iOS, right? Android's phone, Android operating system. So if you're wanting to develop an app these days, you probably have to choose one or the other. But you can also choose a web app, which means you write it once and it runs on everything. So in your notes, HTML5 is popular because of writing web apps to run on anything. This is why learning this right now is such a great thing, okay? So here's what I want to tell you, though, and here's kind of what we're heading towards, is that when you are learning JavaScript, which you are going to do for the next couple weeks, you may run into some challenges because your code will make the browser freeze. Because you will probably write some incorrect code, right? It'll happen. When you're trying to write something, there's a good chance that your browser will what? Freeze. Now what happens when you're coding in Codecademy and your browser freezes? You lose typically everything you've done, which is a pain, right? So here's my troubleshooting suggestions. First, use my print screens and be even more careful when you're writing code, especially when we get to the loops. The functions which we have this week, actually no, this week is the getting started, right? I can't remember. Is it the getting started this week and then next week is functions and then the week after is, so the while loops and the for loops is where this could happen most. But I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about something that really is good. So this is what I was just saying, incorrect JS, and we always abbreviate JavaScript as JS, can freeze. So use a code editor. All right, so I'm going to show you this. There's a free code editor called Sublime Text. So put that in your notes. Sublime Text is a free, very common editor that you can get. I already have it installed. It runs on Windows, it runs on Linux, it runs on Mac. Doesn't run on your phone, sorry. Okay. It might. I shouldn't say that. I should try that. I'm going to try it on my phone tonight. See if I can do it. I don't think so because it's an install, so maybe not. So here's the here's the editor. So why do you want to use an editor? Because you can play with the code, and once you get it working, then you can copy and paste the code into Codecademy. Are you with me? So why am I telling you to use the code editor? To try to what? Well, try to decrease frustration, right? And to give you some more experience with this stuff, because really, you should be thinking about, if this is something you're interested in, taking your experience with Codecademy to the next level. And I'm actually thinking next week I might have you show you how to use Google Drive to host a website. And this would be one of the things we could do, is you'd need an editor. Anybody, does that sound interesting at all, as to creating a little website? Yeah, and learning how to, yeah. So I was actually thinking of using the one on HTML that was the resume. Anybody remember the resume extra credit one? Because you get all the code for it. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, I'm in the code editor right now. You would install it. It's free. So you're going to create 2 files. Now, by the way, you only have to do this part I'm about to do one time. Okay? So put it in your notes. What I'm about to show you, you only have to do one time. You just have to set up the files so that you can then copy and paste your code from, let me see if I also have, oh good, it's still in there. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to do File, New, and there's 2 files. One, oh, it's already in there. So one file I'm going to do File, Save. There's always an index file. Okay, so the first file you create is called index.html. That's your HTML document, okay? Now I'm also going to do this. I'm going to do it in my desktop. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it demo. So there's my first file there. Now, anybody happen to remember when we were doing the Codecademy, what the HTML code that they were having you write? Anybody remember any of it? Headings, HTML tags, beginning and ending. So guess what? If you're really doing this live, if you're really doing this, there's something called a image editor. And all I did here is and you don't have to do that, so I'm just kind of showing you some of the goodies that you get. I put an exclamation point, and then, matter of fact, let me zoom it in. They won't see it. Just show the full screen for a second. So watch what happens when I do that, as long as I've named the document HTML. It automatically creates those tags for me. Awesome, right? Because then I don't have to write all that, because the less you write, the better. So let's say I create the title, or let's actually go over here. Very common one is an H1, right? So if I do tab on that, it creates the beginning and ending tags for me. And then I could just say, hello, JavaScript, right? Hello world is always the first one, but hello, JavaScript. Cool? So now over here, I'm going to go ahead and do file save here. And on my second file, I'm going to call this one file save as. And I'm going to call it app.js. So what do you think? So the .html extension, HTML file. The .js, JavaScript, right? So then when I do that, I'll come back over here and I'll hit save, right? So let me come back up here. So now, let's say I'm in Codecademy and I'm doing something and it's locking up the browser and I'm getting frustrated. And I'm going to take that code that I'm working on, I'm going to paste it. I already have some in here so I don't have to do it real quick. I'm going to take some of that code right there, copy it, and I'm going to paste it in here. All right? So by the way, this is a loop. This is part of what you're going to learn. So this is going to create a loop starting at 100. When it's less than 0, right? That's the condition it's checking for, and this is decrementing, decreasing by 5, and it's doing the console log. But I have to tell my HTML where my JS file is, okay? So there's a script, and again, I'm just going to type that and hit tab, and it creates the opening tag and the closing tag for me like before. src equals. Look at what it's doing. It's actually saying, hey, I know you're looking for a source, and so what I'm connecting the HTML to the JavaScript file, and it's even showing me, hey, I think these are the files you'd probably want. All I have to do is click, and I'm done. So all I've done is I've created an HTML file, I've created a JavaScript file, and now I'm going to go ahead and save both. I'm going to just do save all. Yeah?
So for the source, you just have to give it the file, not the...
That's right. Well, very good. If you're actually doing this at a higher level, you'd probably have a directory with all your JavaScript in it. But I'm creating just a simple example. But in that case, when I did source, if I had a directory, it would have looked into the directory to find it. Good question, okay? You're thinking. Great. So check this out. Now that I'm here, I can right-click, and I can hit Open in Browser. Woohoo, big page, right? The most important part is what I'm about to show you. There's something called DevTools. So in your notes, DevTools. Built into all modern browsers is this awesome thing that allows you to look at what's happening underneath the covers. Because what you're seeing is a web page rendered. But underneath it, and I'm going to right-click on the page, I'm going to do Inspect. Okay? And when I do that, I get two things, but this is the most important. It's the console. So you know, in JavaScript, when you're writing it, you have a lot of these, and you'll see them all over the place. Console.log. You see that? So when you're trying to troubleshoot that something is happening and it happens to have a console.log, all you have to do is do what? Right-click, Inspect Element. And then look at the console to see this. So you can see what this is doing. It started at 100 and it's going down, okay? So once you get the code working, if you play in here, because if you make a mistake in here, it's not going to do what it does in Codecademy. It won't lock you out, okay? So by the way, if I did this one change and I said instead of counting down, I wanted to count up, would that work? How come? Good job, Sarah. That's right. So what would this create? An infinite loop. An infinite loop will freeze, right? It'll freeze Codecademy, but it's actually because it's kind of fun. Let's actually see what it does, right? So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my browser, and now I'm going to refresh it. Now, notice what's happening over here. See this? Because what it's doing, it can never, an infinite loop says I'm going to keep going because you never gave me a condition to drop out of. And when you're coding, this is a very common thing to have happen, okay? So that's why you want to use a what? Code editor. Did you guys get that? So the whole reason I showed you this was to explain why you might want to drop into a code editor sometimes. It's just good to know how to do it. And I think we'll do an exercise next week because I think it's good to know how. So the last thing I want to say about this is this. The other thing about JavaScript, which is true for everything, you've got to be very careful about your syntax. Missing one semicolon, missing one comma, we'll throw it out and it'll give you errors, okay? So the more careful you are, and hopefully you've learned this already, right? Like if you open a curly brace, you also have to end it. So here's the other cool thing too about a code editor is that when I click on a curly brace, it'll show me my pairing one. So if I happen to put an extra one in there, right? Now, by the way, look what it does. It automatically puts the other one. But let's say I accidentally said just that one, right? It's only one, right? So now what it's going to do, it's going to think you're trying to end it here, but really you were trying to end it there. And this guy doesn't have a pairing one. You have to, when you open a curly brace or a parentheses, you have to close it. Okay? So this is good experience. I'm telling you right now. And the reason I'm telling you it's good experience is the last thing I want to show you today is this. I'm going to go to Twitter. I'm going to search for Irma Obling, who's one of the founders of Bitwise downtown, who I've talked a little bit about with you all. But she posted something the other day that actually really surprised me. Fresno is the third best job creating city for technology, according to the in California, according to the PPP, which is a reporting Progressive Policy Institute. So these are viable jobs, very good jobs these days, to be able to write code, create websites, create apps. So if you think this stuff is fun, you might want to think about taking it to the next level. Don't do it just because you want, focus on your passion. So, but if this happens to be your passion, it's actually not a bad time to be in Fresno, right? And people are surprised by, how many of you are like, I'm shocked by that, right? Yeah, most people are like, I didn't know that was happening. And part of it is because we have people focused on it. We teach this stuff. We have this amazing Bitwise South Stadium going downtown. They teach this stuff. Like if you could take a 6-week course focused on more of this stuff too. You can also take courses here. Like next semester, guess what I'm teaching for the first time? JavaScript. And I'm excited. I'm also kind of nervous, but it's fun to do something new. All right. Any questions? Did you learn anything today? Did you get something out? Did you get did you get your money's worth today? Yeah, maybe. All right, let's say goodbye to them and drop the recording.